Welcome to Life and Liberty Radio with David Householder. I'm Josh Jose, and together, you and I are taking another step toward freedom, both spiritual and political. So get comfortable, breathe in, and ignite your imagination. Envision a society that is spiritually deep and truly free. It's easy if you try.
Perhaps you, like me, would like to see a deeper spiritual grounding for our nation and our sort of slide towards a mechanistic, secularistic world. I don't think that serves humans very well, and the Christian tradition has some great spirituality to offer and some depth to offer. And today we introduce to you one of our new spirituality contributors, editors, authors. Her name is Jen Clark Tinker. She's from Texas. She's got an amazing blog, and there's a link to that on the page. And we would like you to listen with special mindfulness today. This is a gripping story about a young girl who took a walk around a reservoir.
The summer before I started high school, I was fishing with my family, and I got bored. And so I decided I was going to go for a walk around the reservoir where we were fishing. Now this reservoir, we called the Res. I don't know why we called it that, but we visited our family in Massachusetts. I'm from Ohio, but we would visit family in Massachusetts every summer. And this summer, it was my dad and my brother and I. And it was the first summer after my parents were divorced. But anyway, so it was just the three of us. But we went to visit my relatives in Massachusetts. So we were fishing I was me and Dad and Eric. And then Uncle Red came along fishing as well. And I was just, I can only take so much. I enjoy fishing to a point. But there's a point where I'm done. I'm just ready to be done. So, and especially back then, I was 14 years old. So I was done fishing. So I decided I was going to go for this walk around the reservoir. And in my mind, I was thinking, I'm going to walk all the way around the reservoir. No big deal, right? It seemed like a small enough place. When you go somewhere every year and you see it year after year and you only see it once a year, well, when you're little, it seems huge, but the bigger you get, the smaller the place becomes. So, hey, at the ripe old age of 14, the reservoir looked tiny to me. So I thought, I'm going to take a walk all the way around the reservoir. My dad offered to come with me, and I said, no, I'll be fine. So I struck out on my walk. And as I'm walking along, I realized that this is probably going to be a little bit more of an endeavor than I had originally thought. So I had to kind of think, well, should I turn around or not or whatever? But I was so determined. I just thought, I'm gonna keep going. So I kept going, but then I started taking shortcuts because the way the reservoir worked is that there'd be, it wasn't just a straight shoreline along the reservoir. There would be parts where the water would kind of jut out, the water would come inland a little bit. And so it formed this like an arc that you had to walk all around that arc to walk around the shoreline and stuff. So it was a little bit more complicated than I originally thought. And it was taking longer than I originally thought. So I started taking shortcuts through some a little bit muddier areas. And that was fine. I didn't mind getting my feet a little bit muddy. No big deal. And I noticed that as I went through muddier areas, that if I stepped on plants or grass or something, that if I could use those kind of as stepping stones through muddier areas, then I could shave off some time on my walk. Well, it was evening, and I'm checking the position of the sun, and I'm trying to assess, okay, how far have I come? And I really didn't have a good sense of that. And so I started to get a little bit more desperate and started to get a little bit more experimental with my shortcuts and started going through a little bit more muck and getting a little bit more muddy. And at this one point, there was this really mucky area, but there were lily pads in this mucky area. And I thought, well, the grass works as stepping stones. Other plants have worked as stepping stones, little clovers and stuff that have worked as great as stepping stones. And there's a plant, a lily pad. So that would be a good stepping stone. And so I kind of saw a path through this one mucky area where there was stepping stone. And I thought I would be fine just to take those stepping stones of lily pads. And so I took a giant leap to get to that first lily pad. And it did not hold my weight as I had hoped. And so my foot kind of sunk in. And so then I brought my other foot up next to it. And that foot, they both kind of just got pretty muddy at that point. So I tried to move my feet, try to pull up on one foot or another, and they wouldn't come out. I couldn't get my feet out. It was like the muck was like this, like a glue almost, that kind of, like a suction effect, I guess, that kept me from being able to pull my foot straight out. And I couldn't slide it either. It wouldn't come that way. And the more I struggled, the deeper into the muck my feet sank. And before I knew it, the muck was up to my ankles. And I kept struggling, and I kept struggling, and I kept struggling. And before I knew it, the muck was up to my calves. And by this time I was starting to get worried, and I thought, I'm really not in a good place here. So I cried out for help, and I called, Dad, Eric, Uncle Red, hey guys, I'm stuck. And I thought, I hope they hear me, but they didn't answer. There was no response. No response. So what was I going to do? I mean, I had to figure this out. So I kept struggling, and I kept pushing, I kept pulling up on one leg and after another and struggling and just struggle. And before I knew it, the muck was up to my thighs. And I stopped again, and I cried out, and I called for help, and no one answered. And I struggled some more, and then I realized it was getting up to my hips. And here I was, half all my legs are totally in the muck, and it's getting up toward my waist, and I'm just, I struggled, and I didn't know what to do. And really, honestly, at that time, I thought I was going to die. I really thought that I was going to die in that time. But in the struggling, I felt like I felt a presence with me in the struggle. And it was God. And God said to me, stop. And I took that to mean I was to stop struggling. So I stopped struggling. And I just prayed. I mean, what else could I do? I just prayed because I knew God was with me. I knew that. I know that. I've always known that God is with me. But I knew that because God spoke to me and he said, stop. So I knew he was there. And so, Lord, I said, if it is your will that I die here in this muck, then so be it. But if it's not, Lord, get me out of here. Tell me what to do. And then I heard a word from the Lord that I can only, it wasn't an audible voice, but I know it was God. It was God told me, I'm not finished with you yet. And so I said, okay, Lord, you're not finished with me yet. So I'm not going to die in the muck. Okay, Lord, so what am I to do? What am I to do, Lord? I don't know. I've struggled and I can't get out, and I don't see a way out. And there was nothing to grab onto. There was nothing. There was no one. There was nothing. And again, God said, lay down. Lay down. And boy, there was nothing about that made any kind of sense to me at that time. When lay down, that what? Like lay down and die? What? I thought you weren't finished with me yet. So I don't get this message to lay down. If you want me out of here, why am I supposed to lay down? But I did it. I thought, okay, I'll do it, because that's just what I just felt like that was what God told me to do. And so I stretched out my hands like Superman, and I leaned forward on my belly, and I thought, this is incredibly crazy. But then as I thought that, my legs started to loosen up and rise up from behind me. And I realized the wisdom, the awesome knowledge that the Lord had given me, that to lay down was because I was putting all my weight on my legs and shoving, instead of pulling myself out, I was shoving myself further in all my struggling. But by laying down, I was spreading out my weight, and I was creating an opportunity for myself to be able to get out. And so that's what I did. And by this time, as I'm finally figuring this out and laying down and rolling over and all of what I did to get out at that point, by this time I heard my dad. Apparently he had heard me call out, and I finally heard him, and he said, Jen, I'm coming. Jen, are you okay? Jen, can you hear me? I'm coming. I'm coming. Are you okay? Answer me. And I said, Daddy, I'm okay. I was stuck in the mud, but I'm okay. Daddy, I'm okay. And he said, Jen, are you okay? And I said, Daddy, I'm okay. He says, Jen, I'm coming. Answer me. And I had already answered him, but I said, Daddy, I'm okay. I'm okay. And he kept calling to me just over and over, Jen, are you okay? Answer me. Daddy, I'm okay. I'm okay. Well, then, even as I saw him finally get up to where I was and come through the brush, and I saw him come up, he's yelling, Jen, are you okay? And he could see me. I was standing, I was on solid ground, and he could see me, and I was a muddy mess. But he says, Jen, are you okay? And I'm like, I'm okay. And I'm telling him, I'm okay. And he's, Jen, are you okay? Daddy, I'm okay. I'm okay. And then my dad, this reminds me of the story of the prodigal son. And sometimes people call it the story of the prodigal father, because the father disgraced himself by running up to the son and embracing him and welcoming him back into the family. That was a disgrace for him to have extended that to his son. And so sometimes I've heard people call him the prodigal father. And so it reminds me, I always think of my dad in this, because when he saw me and he saw me muddy and whatever, he ran up and he wanted to give me a hug. Oh, Jen, give me a hug. I'm so glad you're okay. I was so worried. And I said, Daddy, I'm okay. He says, are you okay? And I said, I'm okay. And he gave me this big hug, and I said, but Daddy, I'm a mess. Look at me. I'm so muddy. I don't want to get you dirty. And he said, but I have to. It doesn't matter. I don't care about the mud. I'm going to hug you anyway. And so he gave me this big hug. And my dad, my prodigal father, he hugged me. And I was okay. And I've been told since then that I probably wouldn't have died out there in the muck. But that I would have gotten out, that it wasn't that big of a deal and all that. But for me, at that time, I really thought that was the end for me. I thought I was going to die. And, the lesson that I take from that experience really is not just I shouldn't have done that kind of lesson, but what I take away from that is the presence that I felt of God with me. That is the most meaningful thing about that experience to me, was knowing that God was there with me when I was in the muck and when I cried out and when I struggled, that God was there with me. And I don't know. I mean, I don't know why God saw fit to save me. I don't know why God said, I'm not finished with you yet. I don't know why God doesn't always deliver us from our muck. But I know that no matter what muck we're in, that God is with us in the muck. And I know that because God was with me in the muck. It was one of the scariest times of my life, but I knew that God was with me. And no matter what it is that each of us get ourselves into, no matter what muck we find ourselves in, no matter what scary situations we're in, God is with us in the midst of that, in the struggle, in the muck. God is with us in the muck.
That's all for now, and thank you for spending this part of your life journey with us. Please tell others about this online magazine, and we welcome your comments on the website. If you haven't already, consider subscribing so that we can let you know about upcoming topics. And please bless us by clicking on our advertising banners from time to time. I'm Lisa Goodwin, signing off for Life and Liberty.